Hey guys, this is Chelsea Perry coming at you with our Module 3 discussion board post for our clinical advocacy in underserved areas. I hope you guys have had a really great week. It's been really long for me. This is my third time trying to record this video because the first time my dogs barked and kept barking and then they started fighting. And then the second time, my video randomly ended before I was done. So, third time's a charm, guys. But yeah, so let's just jump right into it. Hopefully the video works this time. So the prompt for this week, or question, whatever you want to call it, said the textbook identifies several social welfare services in Chapter 5. Which of these services do you believe are most needed in rural communities, and what do you base your answers on and why? So the first one I want to talk about is mental health and substance abuse services. I want to read just a little bit from the textbook, and it says the primary difference is that it is much more difficult for rural people who experience mental health or substance abuse issues to get treatment. That can be found on page 145. And so I chose mental health and substance abuse because I currently work in a rural area, so I know that their resources are limited and there's not a lot. For example, I work at Holston Home for Children in Greenville, Tennessee as a child and family specialist. Now on campus, because we are a residential group home, we do have on campus staff all the time, obviously, and we do provide a lot of services, but there are some services that we do not provide because we don't have the manpower or we don't have the funding, things like that. We're not a big enough city for funding. Just a plethora of different reasons why. So one thing that we don't provide is substance abuse treatment. We have to contract out for that. So when we get a kid who comes into custody that has had substance abuse, and we do an assessment called a SASI with them, which is a subtle screening inventory. I forget the acronym, but it's called a SASI. You can look it up. Subtle Assessment Substance Abuse Screening Inventory, something like that. And it tests for how highly probable they are to have a substance abuse problem if they've used in the past or they currently are using. We don't do substance abuse treatment on campus. So we have to contract out. They have to go to Helen Ross McNabb in Morristown, which is almost 45 minutes away. It is 45 minutes if you hit traffic. And so they go there for intake. Usually they go there for intake. And then intake is usually 3 to 4 hours. And then once they do that, then they start going to IOP. They go 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. And so, like I said, it's an hour there. And then they do 3-hour groups. And then an hour back. And then another example of why it's needed is mental health is obviously a big thing. And like I said, Holston provides a lot of different types of services, but one mental health service that we do not provide is we do provide some trauma focused, but not a whole lot. And so another service that we actually contract out for is sexually reactive things. And so that means if someone has been sexually abused and then they turn around to be the perpetrator on someone else, we do not provide services for that. We contract out. And with that, our kids who come in who have to do that, again, they do intake, which is a process of over 4 days. And then they start going 2 days a week. They go Tuesdays and Thursdays every week. And again, we have to contract out. So we have to use the closest thing to us is Stepping Stones in Kingsport, Tennessee, which from our facility is 52 minutes away. And so, again, limited resources. And so I guess that's kind of why, I base my answers on that, because I work in the field and I know, like, these resources are needed, but we just don't have them. And then the last one that I want to talk about can be found on page 1, or it starts on 164, but it continues on for a while, is services for veterans. So I do want to read just a little bit of that. And it says services for veterans for small communities, because veterans disproportionately live in rural areas where accessing services may be more challenging. And then it skips down. Rural veterans face several barriers to accessing Veterans Administration health and behavioral health services, including long travel distances, limited provider choice, lack of specialty service, and an inadequate supply of providers. And so, again, the why do I base my answer? What do you base your answer on, and why? And I kind of base this because I live in the area where we only have one VA hospital for multiple counties, multiple different areas of the state. So a lot of people, and even out of state, we have the closest one to Asheville, North Carolina, over here in Johnson City, Tennessee. And so a lot of people from different areas travel because Johnson City is a big hub. So it has different services that other VA hospitals might not have. But again, it still doesn't have everything. For example, one thing that I think is really cool that some of the VA veterans do on Fridays is they get to go to a place called Small Miracles and do equine therapy. And I know this because I did my undergrad internship for my bachelor's at Small Miracles, and so I got to work with the veterans on Fridays. And that's just a really cool experience. That obviously is not when the textbook says when it says limited provider choice, lack of specialty services. Obviously, equine therapy is a specialty service. It's not going to be at every place. So, but just lack of services, especially because veterans are one of those population that we often forget that the things that they go through are very traumatic. Not saying that other people don't go through traumatic things, but they go through more traumatic things than we probably, like going overseas and fighting in combat. I'm not going to experience that in my life. Like, I may experience the loss of my mom, but that's nothing compared to being shot at in a war zone. And so services are very limited for that, for mental health, specifically for veterans. For example, my friend Daryl, and I know he wouldn't care that I share this because he's an advocate now for mental health for veterans. But he got out of service last August, like August of 2023, and he tried to go and he was really struggling, and he tried to go get mental health services in October. So he got discharged August 2023, tried to go seek out help in October, and they told him they didn't have any therapy or mental health appointments until April. So, and he was like, what do you mean? Like, that's like 8 months out. And he was like, I'm going to kill myself if I don't have services soon, because I'm going through a lot. And they just were like, sorry, because they didn't have the abundance of resources. So I just think more availability for services for veterans and adding different types of services like equine therapy, I think would be good. But that's kind of it for this week. Discussion board. I hope you guys have a great weekend and a great following week. I will see you guys later.